welcome into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. I'm Beth Houle. Devin Fry joining you today on this Saturday as the Bison look to bounce back from a loss. Kind of unfamiliar territory for us.
Very rare situation. I've never experienced it before, so I mean, this is going to be a first for me. Love to see how the Bison are going to plan to bounce back this week.
Yeah, we're going to get right out to the field, wasting no time out to Springfield, Missouri, where the rest of our crew is joining us now. Ryan Gellner, Kyle Emanuel, and Lee Timmerman. Hey guys, how is it in Springfield?
Very good afternoon from Springfield. Another beautiful day for football. We couldn't ask for much better here. Before we talk football, let's pause just for a second, though. It is Colorectal Awareness Month, and all of us here in Springfield, you back home, are wearing blue today, along with some blue pins. Nearly 150,000 people will be diagnosed with colorectal cancer in 2021. It is the third most common diagnosed cancer in men and women combined in the United States. And 1 in 5 are diagnosed between the ages of 20 and 54. Our very own Brian Sean, who usually calls play-by-play for North Dakota State Athletics, diagnosed last month with colon cancer. Lee, though, Brian is on his way back.
It is. He feels very well. I talked to him just when I was pulling into the parking lot at Hector yesterday, and we had a really nice conversation. Bison says he feels great. He's got the okay from the doctors. He is going to join us for the Illinois State game next week. So Brian's ready to go, and he'll start his chemo treatments a little bit later this month, and hopefully he has those spaced as well to try to avoid our football Saturdays, and he'll be ready to go. So it's good to have you back next week, Bison.
Through the month of March, you will see people around North Dakota State, people obviously throughout the United States, wearing these blue pins for colorectal cancer awareness. We've got them on today. Bison coaches have them on today. It is certainly an important topic. On to the topic of football, though, guys. Kyle, we'll start with you. North Dakota State lost last week. That's obvious. They got to get past that and play today.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously been the big talk. How do they lose? How do they lose the game? Well, 39 in a row is pretty good, right? I think we would all agree 39 in a row is pretty good. In football, you will lose in football. It happens a lot. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess for Bison fans, it doesn't happen a lot around here. So they're going to look to bounce back. I think you're going to see a focused team today. I think we're all expecting that. But we also still don't know a ton about this team, kind of. It almost feels like that. So we'll have to see what we find out today out on the field today, Lee.
Well, Kyle, just because I got up way too early one of the other mornings, I started going through the schedule, and the first year that we've had the Bison contract on TV was 2007. So I started there and went through last week. NDSU's record in that time frame is 140-20. So was last week bad? Yes, but in the big scheme of things, it's not that bad. And just in case you're wondering, in that same time, our friends to the north are 81-67 and had 2 playoff losses, and that includes a 10-2 Division II year for UND. And just in case you're wondering, our friends to the south down at Brookings, NDSU has 35 more wins than the Jackrabbits, and the Jacks have 40 more losses than NDSU in that same time frame. So there, put it in perspective.
Lots to talk about in this football game. We'll have much more from Springfield, much more in our Fargo studios. Guys, back to you.
Much, guys. Welcome back to our Fargo studio. Devin, bouncing off of what they're talking about, obviously Lee bringing up a really great point. Yes, it's tough to see a loss. Yes, it's tough to see that sort of thing happen, but it's not the end of the world. And in comparison, it's small potatoes when it comes to what other teams, other programs, especially here in the area, have experienced over the last few years.
And in the grand scheme of things, in this last 10-year run of Bison football, it's amazing to see what they've been able to do over this span. One loss isn't going to be the end of the world. Now, it all depends on how they bounce back from there. That's
Absolutely.
where things make a difference.
You've heard coaches plenty of times over the years, over our lifespan of being athletes, you can't let the same team beat you twice. And so it's all about NDSU responding in this one. And taking a look at the Valley standings, I mean, it's important. Of course, North Dakota now 3-0, South Dakota now 1-1 after that game taking place on Thursday. UND picking up that 3rd consecutive win over a 3rd consecutive ranked opponent. But these standings, seeing the Bison in 4th place there, it's been a while since we've seen NDSU anywhere but the top of those standings. And it's important to rectify this situation because there is, of course, the rest of the season to think about, and those standings and those playoffs.
Right. Obviously, a win here today brings the Bison right back up to that 1-2 area. Obviously, North Dakota is going to be ahead. They're undefeated in conference play. If NDSU is able to move past Missouri State, they'll pass them there. South Dakota's already fallen. So, and also the fifth team in that conversation, Northern Illinois, they're currently down against Youngstown State. So a lot going on
Which is
right
crazy
now.
when you think about this. If we move on to the Bison football schedule here, taking a look at who they have coming up, there's a whole bunch of back and forth and everybody kind of beating up on each other, which tends to happen in the Missouri Valley.
Right.
But it's interesting to see so many of these teams beating up on each other after, you look at a 25-7 win for the Bison over Youngstown State, and then that loss to Southern Illinois. So now to see Youngstown State beating Southern Illinois, it's just really goofy.
It's a very bizarre year, but I mean, we are playing football in March, so like regular season football in March. So of course it was going to be a weird year. That was bound to happen. But in college football in general, if you have 2 losses in a season, a lot of people tend to just kind of call it in at that point anyway.
And the straw seems to be a lot shorter for NDSU.
Right.
A loss at all, and everybody goes, oh my gosh, what's happening?
Right.
This season's over. This is the worst team in history.
Well, one thing we heard about, and we even talked about it back here at home, sometimes a loss is necessary. Matt Entz talked after the game saying that there are some guys in the locker room that just because they put on green and gold, they think they're going to win on Saturdays. And as we've proven now, that's not always the case. You're not guaranteed a victory just because you're on a certain team. So sometimes this loss is necessary to kind of really prove that you are mortal. You know?
And I think an important part of that, there was a time when being an NDSU football player, these guys worked really hard. They had an edge on their shoulder, a chip on their shoulder, if you will, because they were guys that weren't recruited anywhere else. They were guys that were overlooked in different situations, and so they were here to prove something, that they were as good as anybody else, that they should have gotten a chance at Wisconsin, at Minnesota. You think of your Billy Turners, you think of some of those different guys that have come through and had that chip on their shoulder, so they were here to prove something. These guys now being recruited to NDSU are like really proud to be a Bison because they want to carry on that winning championship tradition. So it's kind of takes a different attitude, a different necessary look at things. And I think you're right. I think it's absolutely okay that these guys had a little bit of a wake-up call. There's also a lot of questions still to be answered about this team. Kyle mentioned it off the top in Springfield about there's a lot of things we still don't necessarily know about this team. So if they can respond today, answer some of those questions, and maybe even find some of that confidence themselves as they look into this.
Right. They're not, and even after last week, they're not the team I thought they were. Obviously against Youngstown State, they dominated on the ground and were able to win the game that way. Last week, that wasn't able to happen. So they're still trying to find that identity.
Make those adjustments.
Exactly.
Which is so rare for NDSU.
Very bizarre. And then even they had the Hail Mary at halftime, and you thought, okay, this is the spark. It's over. And it just never clicked. It never came all the way back around. So I think this is kind of what we were expecting in the second half of last week. That's what I'm hoping to see out of this game anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that'll do it for us here in the first break. We've got plenty more coming up on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. Stick around. We'll be back live here in Fargo after the break. Welcome back to the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. NDSU getting off the bus, heading in to Springfield earlier today, getting ready for this one. It looks like they've got the game face on.
Oh, absolutely. It was an awkward feeling on the sideline last week. They're looking to erase that feeling going into this week. All business.
Really feel that, even when we talked to them on Tuesday this week, that they were still bothered, not still holding on. But they were upset. They wanted, they understood what this meant, that they gained the attention for the wrong reasons. In asking the guys, I mentioned, did you notice, the national attention? It was everywhere. It was on NPR that they were talking about this end of the 39-game streak on Monday afterwards. And I asked the guys, do you recognize that? Did you pick up on what a big deal this was nationally? I mean, we had ESPN alerts. The guy said, they got back in the locker room, looked at their phones, and they had an ESPN alert about their own loss. Just something you don't see. FCS football doesn't get that kind of attention, but they do when it's the Bison, and they said it only motivates them.
Right, and like that's got to be a tough feeling getting in the locker room. We could feel how uncomfortable it was on the sideline from the studio. We were watching back in the sports office, and they just showed the sideline, and I was like, this is uncomfortable. I can only imagine getting back in the locker room. Matt Ent said that it was the fastest they've ever cleaned and gotten out of a locker room. So, and then, you know, like you said, the national attention that it brought. It's the team that ended a record winning streak, and so these guys are going to look to bounce back in a big way. You know they got to be hungry for it.
And then on the opposite side, Missouri State, coming off of a win over Western Illinois, ended with a couple of big turnovers to send the Bears out of that game, having to feel confident and ready for this game. We're going to head back out to Springfield, Missouri now, where Ryan Gellner is standing by with the voice of the Bears. Guys, do we have? All right, well, obviously having some technical difficulty, waiting for, okay, here we go, out to Ryan Gellner and the voice of the Bears. Okay, obviously having some technical difficulties there. We'll try and catch up with Tom Ladd and Ryan Gellner in a little bit.
Gotta love live TV, right?
Gotta love live TV. Taking a look at this matchup, you know, what really stands out to me is Missouri State's defensive line is fairly impressive, and that's where I'm really interested to see the matchup this week, because it's that run game that the Bison really struggled to get going last week. So if the Bears were able to take a page out of Southern Illinois' playbook to see what they're able to implement there. They forced some turnovers, had some good action there. Kevin Ellis, kind of the hero last week, the defensive end for Missouri State, grabbing those 2 turnovers, forcing a fumble, grabbing an interception late in the game to end any chance of the Leathernecks coming back. Really interested to see what they're able to do and if they can provide that same enforcement against NDSU.
And that was one thing they did really well in both aspects of the game against Western, whether it was the run game shutting that down or even whenever Western would try to pass. A lot of times the quarterback was in his second drop back, and all of a sudden he's getting swarmed by Missouri State D linemen. So like you said, the matchup up front is going to be, it always comes back to up front, Beth.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
And so that's going to make the biggest difference, is whether or not this Bison offensive line can get some movement up front, get some guys out of the way, so try to disrupt what Missouri State does really well up front.
Well, and I think on the other end of it, they've got some receivers that have some real good experience. One thing we've talked a lot about is NDSU is kind of lacking in that experience in a lot of areas around the field, including in the receiving core for NDSU. Showed maybe a couple of weaknesses in their secondary last week as well. Of course, the defense was on the field for a long time. I'm just going to put that out there. 41 minutes on the field is a long time for a Bison defense.
It's a very important caveat.
But Missouri State has some receivers that have quite a bit of experience. They've got Jordan Murray, 24 games straight with a reception. Wow. They've also got Lorenzo Thomas, who leads the team and is setting himself up to be in the record books for the Bears as well.
Well, and we were talking about what Missouri State can do really well, and one thing that they did, their receivers did, was take advantage of missed opportunities. A defensive back would try to play the ball too aggressively. It would end up in the receiver's hands, and they're off to the races because there's no one there to stop them. So they take very good advantage of any defensive miscues, whether it be in coverage or missed tackles. We saw on the film against Western Illinois, anytime there was a missed tackle, it was a Missouri State receiver 20 yards down the field finally getting brought down. Yeah. So taking advantage of mistakes, so the Bison really have to tighten up, which with what we saw last week, that's what they're going to have to work on. I'm sure that's what they worked on in practice, was strong fundamentals. So
I think there's a lot of that, yeah. Well, we're going to try again to go out to Springfield, Missouri. Ryan Gellner and Kyle Emanuel should be standing by with a little bit of how it's done for us. Guys?
Yeah, Beth, how it's done. We're going to talk to Kyle a little bit about the Bison defense and disguising defensive, because it got North Dakota State in trouble a little bit last week. Let's talk about disguising defenses and how it's done, Kyle.
Yeah, Ryan. Well, I mean, when you think about offensively, obviously you want to. The more you know about what the defense is doing, the better for you. So defensively, just the opposite. You want to do everything you can to keep the offense so they don't know what you're in. And a lot of times what we saw last week against Southern is they would go hurry up. They would hit them with that clap, and they would get NDSU to show their hand, essentially. And what that means, a lot of times defense, you can tell what kind of coverage you're in based on how many safeties are high. You talk about cover 2, basically meaning 2 safeties deep. Cover 3, and there's some other coverages. You roll another safety down into the box. Now you're a little bit better against the run. So last week we saw a lot of the RPO. They would check it when they'd see NDSU was in a run defense or something like that, or if there's too high, now they're going to run the ball. Southern did a good job of it. I know that's going to be an emphasis for NDSU this week.
So for the Bison, it's show up front. So the quarterback takes a look at the defense, thinks he knows what's going on, and then at the last second on the snap, you switch. Last week, like you said, it got him in trouble because the hand clap made North Dakota State not only show their hand, but they were so careful not to show their hand. A lot of times they were jumping off sides.
Yeah, they were jumping off sides. Sometimes there's communications errors. There's a lot of things that can happen when the offense starts to go fast. And we saw NDSU struggle with that a little bit. But yeah, as a defense, you want to be able to be multiple, and you want to be able to know what you're doing. Sometimes you have to tip your hand a little bit. And like we said, Southern did a good job of that last week. And I know David Braun, he talked to us about it this week. That's going to be something they have to do better, because ultimately it just puts your guys in a better situation once the ball is snapped. And I think Jayden Johnson is a guy that if you can confuse him a little bit, maybe you roll down a safety and so now he thinks it's one high and then he drops back, or something, you show him something different than what you showed pre-snap. I think that's something NDSU can use to have success today.
You mentioned the quarterback Johnson. Also earlier you mentioned RPO, run pass option. It's a copycat league. Let's just start at the very basic of how it's done. Run pass option. What is it?
Well, we saw a lot of it last week, and it's basically when you see the quarterback, he's going to ride the running back, and if he sees one thing, he's going to hand it off. If he sees another, he's going to pull it, and he's going to throw that little slant we saw a lot last week. And the reason it's so hard, and I talked a little bit about it on the broadcast last week, as a linebacker, you're there to protect against that slot, that slant coming in behind you. But when they start running that fake, now you have to respect your run gap as well, and your run gap is moving away from you. So your run gap's moving away, your pass coverage is behind you, still in the same spot, and that quarterback's just staring right at you. If you go and you try to play the run, now he's going to pull it and he's going to throw it right behind you, and just the opposite if you try and play against the pass.
A little bit of a third element to that as well. The quarterback could keep it, run himself.
Yep,
he can keep it and pass it, or he can hand it off and gash you up the middle. So there's lots of things going on. It is, Kyle, truly a game within a game.
It really is, and it's a game plan situation, and I think, sometimes you have to take guys completely out of coverage. You say, hey, you're just in the run fit, or you take them completely out of the run fit and say, hey, we just need you in coverage. It's a cat and mouse game, obviously, between these two coordinators.
We are 45 minutes from kickoff here in Springfield, Missouri on a beautiful afternoon, the home of the Bears. This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show. Lots to do. Kickoff around the corner. Back in Springfield after this.
Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. Back to Springfield for that interview with Ryan Gellner.
Tom Ladd, the play-by-play voice today for Missouri State, joins us. And Tom, how much of this week has been maybe an unusual week in talks about NDSU's performance the last couple of weeks and how maybe these guys are ripe for the plucking?
Well, I'll tell you, it's strange because everybody's very respectful of the Bison and what you guys have done over the years, and kind of shocked after last week's loss to SIU, and really in the manner in which it occurred. I mean, expected a close ball game. SIU looked like they put it on the Bison a little bit, so we're all a little surprised by that. Very respectful of how you guys have played over the years, 9-time national champs. I mean, all the numbers you've put up over the years. So we know it's still going to be a big game, and probably, North Dakota State going to come in with a little edge today too, a little upset.
Missouri State at the same time comes in with some momentum. Nice win a week ago and things starting to get going in the right direction.
Bobby Petrino's come in, and there's a different culture here with Missouri State. So you hope after an 0-3 fall that the spring turns around now, and you got a good defensive unit. The offense is improving every week, so you hope that things are turning for the better at Missouri State. It's been a long time since they've had a really good football team here.
All eyes on the quarterback. Jayden Johnson played well a week ago.
Looks like that's going to be the key on both sides. You know, the new quarterback at North Dakota State. You got the freshman at Missouri State. Jayden's a guy that's improving every week. Obviously, probably helped him to have the split season the way it is. He passed for over 200 yards last week, threw his first touchdown pass. So everything positive with the freshman quarterback.
Defensively so far, the Bears have been good against the run, which is what NDSU for years has made a living on. That may be the matchup today.
That's the big key. I think both sides are going to look to try and stop that run and put pressure on the quarterbacks. So the Bears have, I think they've only given up 90 yards per game on the run on the ground this year. So that's a huge key for them. If they can stop the run game, put some pressure on the quarterback, then I think they have a chance today.
Tom, thank you. And by the way, thank you for the gorgeous weather today. Doesn't get much better than this.
A couple weeks ago, we had about 6 inches of snow on this field. So you're lucky. It's beautiful today, beautiful in the Ozarks.
It is kind of crazy. Everybody was so worried about this spring season because of the weather and the need for the domes and having those early games in the domes. Outside of that first week, it's worked out okay. All right, let's take a look at this QB comparison here. Looking at Jayden Johnson first, obviously hearing Tom talk a little bit about him there. Maybe we can bring those. There we go. Bringing those numbers back up. 661 yards. Of course, he had that split season, so this is now 4 games of action for him to bring in these numbers. But I think the big thing that stood out, exactly what Tom said, it's his second in 3 games with over 200 yards of passing. He's just continuing to build that confidence. Also got his first touchdown pass last week in a go-ahead touchdown, 22 yards to put Missouri State on top of Western Illinois. That's huge for a young quarterback to start to get that confidence.
First touchdown is a big deal no matter what, but when it's the go-ahead score, that's why they won the game.
There's extra pressure on it.
Yeah, a little bit. And for a young quarterback to be able to handle that, he's going to be coming into this one confident. And that's going to be dangerous. When a quarterback is young and talented and confident, that's a very scary combination of things.
Yeah, so we saw that with Trey Lance.
Exactly, yeah. He was good.
He did okay. He did okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at Zeb Nolan's numbers now into his second, or now beginning to, excuse me, let me try that again. He's looking at starting his 3rd game here now for the Bison with these numbers. Threw that first interception last week, but they sent him back out there looking to bounce back. He's a calm, cool kid.
Right, yeah, and we talked about how he's kind of willing to let things go however the offense is going to go, whether they dominate by the ground or they kind of have to rely on him. Zeb's going to be ready for it no matter which one gets thrown at him. It's just going to be a matter of kind of rolling with this. We saw earlier in the season, they really wanted him to figure out those reads, fire away to the underneath routes. But at a certain point, you're going to have to let Zeb cook a little bit.
Let him just throw it downfield. It's what he's good at. I know that moves.
Yeah,
that
moves a lot.
It's not center down. But I want to see it. I mean, that's what he's about. That's what we've seen it. That's the stuff that sent Twitter on fire. You know, that throw to Cole Jacob. Let him find Cole Jacob. They're roommates. They're confident. They're comfortable. I want to see Christian Watson step it up too.
Yeah.
I need to see him make some of these catches, be that receiver for this team. I understand it's probably a little bit more difficult because people are able to hone in on him, but do your 111th. Get out there. Let Zeb Nolan throw the ball. Let him loose.
And we saw a little bit of that with the Hail Mary. It wasn't quite as long as most Hail Marys you tend to see, around 35 yards, something like that.
Yeah, you took a little issue with the term
I mean,
Hail
it's still technically a Hail Mary because it's a last-second play.
Technicalities. Yeah, I want to see this. I want to see them set him free. He's not going to run away with this one on his feet, so let's play to his strengths. We know exactly what his strengths are. Would love to see that one really open up. But we've got plenty more to talk about coming up on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. Stick around. We'll be back. Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. We go out now back to Springfield, Missouri for our Sanford Orthopedic Sports Medicine Injury Report.
And Dr. Ben Noonan joins us today from Sanford. And Dr. Noonan, we usually talk a lot about sports or sports injuries. We'll step aside today, and there is a bigger issue at hand in the world. It is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And with our colleague Brian Sean announcing his diagnosis. We thought it was important during this month to maybe dedicate this segment to colorectal cancer.
Yeah, Ryan, I mean, it certainly is. When you first asked me to talk about colorectal cancer, I wasn't sure, being an orthopedic surgeon, not an area of my expertise, but it is such an important thing to talk about. I thought it was important to use this avenue to bring it forward. And I thought it might be interesting to just hear briefly what is cancer from an orthopedic surgeon standpoint, so not an expert on it. But, I mean, basically it's a diverse category of diseases that comes down to the cellular level. And our cells are designed to grow and replicate, but stop and then eventually die. And what happens with cancers on a simplistic level is that signal's lost, and they just keep growing and growing and dividing, and they can travel to other areas of the body, and eventually they start to crowd out the healthy cells and take away their functions, and that's where the real problem lies. They've just lost that innate ability to stop. And in colorectal cancer, that initially presents as these little polyps, and that's what we find when doing a colonoscopy.
It affects such a wide age of people, men and women. What can people watching do to try to take the first step towards screening or whatever else it might be?
Well, there are definitely some simple things that we need to do, and you can kind of break them into three things. One, risk factors, and there's risk factors we can control and risk factors we can't control. The ones we can control are not rocket science. They're very common. Weight, diet, smoking, exercise, alcohol intake, all things we can moderate or control that will reduce our risk. Some risks we can't control, and that's genetic risk factors, which usually manifest as a family history. And those are important things that our primary care doctors know about so they can adjust our screening. Screening is critical, and what screening means is looking for a disease in someone who shows no signs of the disease. And that's critical in colorectal cancer, finding it early. And the recommendations are at 45 years of age, everybody undergoes screening. And that can be a colonoscopy, or it can be one of a number of stool sample tests where they're looking for some of the markers of colon cancer in your stool. And then finally, signs and symptoms of colon cancer. And unfortunately, these don't usually manifest until pretty late in the disease. And that would be changes in your bowel habits, abdominal pain, unintentional weight loss, fatigue. Again, those are things we never want to see, and those aren't specific to colon cancer. It doesn't mean you have cancer, but those are things you need to visit with your primary care doctor about. And I think if there's one message that we should put forth with this is with colorectal cancer and all cancers, we need to really be proactive and not reactive. You need to visit your primary care doctor and talk about this, and if you don't have a primary care doctor, you need to get one.
Thank you for the expertise, and Doc, thank you for the message. It's an important one.
My pleasure.
And with that, we move into our Sanford Health Injury Report. Hunter Lupke on the sidelines today for North Dakota State. He has a shoulder injury. Jake Kubis and his hip questionable. He likely will not play today. And defensively, Dawson Weber still out. He has a shoulder injury. Directly to our Dakota Magic Casino, keys to the football game. And the big thing today is, number one, don't let last week happen again, and by that, don't let SIU beat you again. It has been 1,210 days between losses for North Dakota State. Don't let SIU beat you twice. Lee?
Yes, indeed, Ryan. I think that is a very good point. Obviously, you want to learn off of what happened, or in some cases, what did not happen last week. And in talking with Tyler Roll, the offensive coordinator, one of the things I thought was real interesting that T. Roll was talking about is taking the playbook and narrowing it. Try to find the cleanest 25 run plays and the cleanest 15 pass plays and use those today. And if it works, repeat it and go back to it.
Yeah, and I would kind of piggyback off that and just say you could really tell when we talked to Tyler that he wanted his guys to play fast. He wanted them to cut it loose, and you sense that from both sides of the ball, and really to not let Southern, whatever happened last week, all the outside noise, let it go and let it be and move on and focus on Missouri State.
Number two in our keys to the football game is pretty self-explanatory, but North Dakota State wears white T-shirts before game during pre-game's warm-ups. On those white T-shirts, they have the letters RNME. What that stands for right now means everything, and you can see that hashtag RNME on the back of those T-shirts. Again, right now means everything. It's pretty fitting for North Dakota State, Kyle.
Yeah, Ryan, and I think that goes right along with key number one and just being, I like this saying, I've heard this before, be where your feet are. And don't let what happened last week, don't let happen what might happen next week or the week after or anything else. Don't let that affect right now. You can only affect the present, and the present is the most important thing right now. And I think along with that, they needed to be, right now means everything needed to be Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday to get ready for this game. And now you've here and go cut it loose, as we said before.
And it's about looking ahead, too, guys. You can't look ahead because next week isn't promised to you. You've got to win one game at a time. It's a short season. It's a condensed season. Right now truly does mean everything for North Dakota State. Number 3 in our Dakota Magic Casino keys to the football game is simply play with urgency. And it doesn't mean just play fast. It means to maybe even minimize things and do what you do best. Lee, number 3, play with urgency.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Kyle. Excuse me, Kyle is standing next to me, but you're right, Ryan. And I was going to bring up the point that Kyle said when touching back on number 1. This also touches back on number 1, I think, in our keys to the game. You just have to, make sure that you're focused in on what you need to do and what you are doing. I think we saw a play last week, and we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but you might remember just a little, probably 5-yard out toward Christian Watson. Christian was already turning upfield. He forgot to catch the ball. Well, he was trying to make a 5-yard play into a 65-yard play and didn't do the first things first. And I think that's kind of goes back to what you were talking about, too, right?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a similar game plan to Youngstown State. I really do. When we talked to the coordinators, I kind of got that sense. Youngstown State, when week 1, it was a simple game plan. They didn't know what they were going to see, so they went simple. They let the guys go play fast. Last week, maybe got a little bit more multiple in the things that they wanted to do. Now, and I think it slowed the guys down a little bit. Now, back to, like we've said all along, it's kind of the theme of the week. Get back to what you do well. Go out and play fast and try and win a football game.
You can see behind me and you guys, it's also about North Dakota State having to create their own energy today. It is tough to be on the road when there's not a lot of people in the stadium. That will be the scene once again today for North Dakota State. This is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. More to do from Springfield when we come back. Welcome back to the Ozarks, the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show in front of the Bears and the Bison from Robert W. Plaster Stadium here in Springfield, Missouri. We are 3 hours straight south of Kansas City this week in Springfield, Missouri. Welcome back to the football field. And as you know by now, the streak, it is over for North Dakota State, and it ends at 39 straight wins. The longest winning streak in FCS history is literally history. This is Herdline News. The 39 straight wins is the 3rd longest winning streak in Division I history, a remarkable 1,210 days without a loss. The Bison beat 22 nationally ranked opponents during that run. The last time, though, North Dakota State lost 2 games in a row, 4,150 days ago. I'll say that again. The last time the Bison lost 2 straight games, 4,150 days ago. That was in 2008 when NDSU lost 5 straight games in a season that brought just 3 wins. North Dakota State dropped from 1st to 6th in the Stats FCS Top 25 poll following the loss to Southern Illinois last week. The Herd had been ranked number 1 since the 2017 postseason poll. NDSU has been ranked 5th or higher in the FCS Top 25 since 2015, 3 weeks after South Dakota upset the Bison 24-21 in Fargo. Of course, that 2015 season, it ended with a national championship win over Jacksonville State. No telling how this season will end for the Bison, but no doubt NDSU has to look at the rest of this season one game at a time. For Bison head coach Matt Entz, the only game he's focused on is the one this afternoon here in Springfield.
Matt, I would assume after last week and a week of practice, you're glad there's another game today to get going.
Oh, definitely. Wish there had been a game on Tuesday. That was where our team was mentally. They were ready to get that one behind us, but we knew we had a lot of work to do this week. We've had a a good week of practice, good energy. That was the thing that we were looking for. Just how do we respond? We need to make sure we learn from last week and move forward.
All week, when you've met with the media, you've talked, let's start on offense, you've talked about first down and executing on first down.
Well, we just can't get behind the sticks. Too many second and long, third longs. Those make it difficult to add another first down to the series, and trying to find ways to stack some first downs and create some drives. The more downs you have to operate, the better chance you have for an explosive, the better opportunity you have to score. So that's what we're trying to put ourselves in, an opportunity to be successful on each series.
We'll use the same word, defense. It again is about execution.
Yeah, it comes to that third down. I think we've had teams in a lot of third down situations. We just need to be better on third down. And then the second thing is better at ball disruptions. We've gotten our hands on a few, but we haven't created any takeaways. We need to have a sense of urgency. First man in's got to continue to tackle well, but the second and third guy in need to be going after some strips and some takeaways.
Give us an overall feel of practice this week, and obviously a little bit different because you're not used to coming off a loss. How was practice this week?
It was good. I was pleased with the energy. Were there still errors in practice? Of course there is. That's why you have practice during the course of the week. We're by far a finished product. I know we're going to continue to get better each and every week, but I like our kids were frustrated. They were upset. They were mad that how we played was unaccustomed to what's expected of us, and we need to continue to be better.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, you bet.
That is the Bison head coach, Matt Entz. This is an absolutely beautiful campus here in Springfield, Illinois. The outside looks of what is a gorgeous day on campus really is nice here in Springfield. It'll be a nice football game. The wind may be a little bit of a factor this afternoon, but really not much at all when you consider outdoor football in the month of March. It does not get much better than this. And that is a live look over top of the football field here at Missouri State. They redid one of the sidelines a couple of years ago, really dressed this place up. The Bears and the Bison to do battle today. We've got much more to do. It is the Farmers Union Insurance Bison pregame show. We go up to the booth when we come back to Springfield, Illinois after this.
And welcome back to the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. Our next segment is one that we call Bobcat Heavy Lifting. This is where Kyle Emanuel picks a player that we're going to focus on a little bit more, delve into what they do and what is expected of them. And this week we're going offense, and a very talented young man who wears number 1.
Yeah, absolutely, Lee. And this is a guy I give a lot of props to week 1, and I was really, really impressed with him last year after being away from Bison football for a little while, and then coming back and seeing Christian Watson. I've talked about how I think he's an NFL talent. I really do, and I think he's one of the best players on the offense. And they found ways to get him the ball more than just throwing the ball week 1 a little bit. But we just haven't seen the success yet that maybe we expected from a guy like this. I know Beth talked about it in the pregame a little bit earlier, how we need to see a little bit more from Christian. And I think we're going to see that. I hope we're going to see that today. I think, we all know that the passing game has to get going a little bit, and he's going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, and when you talk with Randy Hedberg, which I do every week, the quarterbacks coach for North Dakota State, and you talk about the importance, obviously, of a quarterback from the offensive side. And the simple term is Zeb Nolan just has to play better.
Yep.
Well, when Zeb plays better, Christian Watson is going to be much more effective on the offensive side. But it looks really strange, I would say, after the 3 games so far that are played this year, and this is including the game when Trey was the quarterback back in the fall. But Christian only has 4 catches for 36 yards, and he has 6 rushing attempts. So
crazy.
How weird is that your number 1 receiver still at this point of the year has 2 more carries than he does catches?
Yeah, that is a strange stat. And I think the other thing, though, that will help Christian and help this off, getting Phoenix Sproles back eventually. Obviously, he's your number 2 receiver. That's going to help. And being efficient. We hear Tyler Roll talk a lot about being efficient offensively, staying on schedule. We just heard Coach Entz talk about it. If they can be efficient, now that opens up your whole playbook. That makes it easier to find players like him, find players like even some of the tight ends that haven't got maybe involved as much as they would have liked so far. So if they can do better first and second down, get some guys back healthy, we won't see those guys today. That will also help things out a little bit for this Bison offense.
Well, in keeping the theme of the Bobcat heavy lifting on Christian Watson, let's delve into a little bit, Kyle, the tight end situation. T-Roll, the offensive coordinator, gave us 3 names about guys who have to get more involved.
Yep.
1 was Christian Watson, and 2 were tight ends. You mentioned those guys. Josh Babbage wears number 81. Noah Gindorf wears number 87. How will those 2 guys getting in a little bit more involved help Watson on the outside?
Well, I always think of tight ends as safety nets, especially when I remember saying this last year when Trey was making his first start. Those are guys, they're big targets, right? That usually in play action and things like that, you can get them open. But when you take pressure off of Christian by getting those guys involved, and I haven't noticed anything necessarily they're doing coverage wise. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're rolling different coverages towards Christian. Maybe they always have a safety over top. But once you start getting other guys involved, once the running game gets going, once your tight ends start catching balls, now you just have to play base defense, and you just have to hope defensively your DBs can hold up against a guy like Christian Watson. So, like as we know, Lee, football it's all intertwined, and it's all gonna go together.
We have 7 minutes on the Coors Light countdown clock right now, and just again to give you a little bit of an example about Christian Watson in 2019, the last full season, if you will. Watson averaged 21.5 yards per catch. That's the second most in NDSU history. Tim Strelo back in '99 had at 22.4. But again, it gives you an indication of the type of big play ability that Christian Watson has, and that this offense right now, I don't know if desperate's the right word,
right,
but boy, they really want to see it happen.
And they just really need something to push the defense vertically. I think everyone knows NDSU likes to run the power. I talk about it all the time. We talk about the line play and everything. But when you can push the defense vertically, when you can stretch them out, I like, if I could have one word to describe Christian Watson, it's explosive. I think even last year we saw him hurdle a guy. I don't know if he went very far after, but it was explosive. It was impressive to see. He has a ton of talent. We all know that, and I think defenses know that as well. But I think today, against a Missouri State team where if you had to say, where's their best, what are they best at? I would say the defense. I think the defense is a strength of this team, whether they want to admit it or not. I think they have a really good defense. So getting him involved, getting a lot of people involved is going to be big.
Okay, we have just a little bit of time left in this segment, and you mentioned offensive line. I want to bring up offensive line. Don't be surprised today if you see some of those guys playing in different positions. And the one person specifically I'm going to bring up is Cordell Volson, starting left tackle, taking over Dylan Radens, had a tremendous year last year at right tackle. Don't be surprised if you see Cordell Volson playing maybe a little right tackle today, just to see if they can take the 5 guys that they have right now and find in that right mix, because again, the offense is searching just a little bit.
Yeah, play calling is a big thing, but also just finding where your players fit within your offense. They didn't have a spring ball to kind of do that. I know they had a lot of time in the fall, but sometimes you just have to find where your players fit. That's a big part of coaching, is knowing what you have as players, what they're capable of, and then putting them in the best position. So if you have to move some guys around, they're searching a little bit, and we'll see if it helps out.
The pregame show rolls on from Plaster Stadium right here in Springfield, Missouri. NDSU and Missouri State. We're inching closer to the kickoff. We'll be right back with more on the Farmers Union Insurance pregame show after you see this.
Welcome back into the Farmers Union Insurance Bison football pregame show. We are 1 minute and 40 seconds away on our Coors Light countdown clock. There you go. Getting ready for the Bison and the Bears. See the Bears taking the field there, coming down their little grass hill there. Want to tell you, we've talked a lot about how surprising this NDSU loss is, how weird this is, how unusual. They're not the only ones. James Madison currently trailing 17-3 at halftime to Elon in their first game of the year. It's the pandemic, folks. It's the season. It's an off year. It's interesting to see. We're going to see a little bit of a shakeup in FCS football, I think, this spring.
For fans of parity, this spring season is for you. This was designed for you. The COVID season is creating some interesting situations.
I mean, SDSU is lost, but when you think about it, with those players leaving early, so many teams have had to adjust where they never could have expected to. There was no ability to plan for this. So less than a minute left here on our Coors Light countdown clock. Devin, final thoughts?
The Bison don't lose twice. Historically, when they have lost these games, they haven't lost 2 in a row. So it should be a big bounce back game for them. They have a good opponent to do that against today. Let's see what they can do.
I totally agree with you. I'm ready to see him come back. I'm excited to see Code Green be confident again, bring some of that fire, some of that maybe a little bit of anger.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that. It's a violent game. I want to see a little bit of that anger from NDSU's defense and be able to see that offense let loose a little bit. Have some fun, play with some confidence, and get back on the right side of that wins column. Well, that will do it for us here on the Farmers Union Insurance Bison Football pregame show. We're sending you out to Springfield now. We'll see you again at halftime.